He is one of the most important characters in the history of Middle-earth, the creator of the 3 Elven Rings, and the flawed hero tricked by Sauron himself. Had it not been for Celebrimbor, it's very possible that Sauron wouldn't have created the One Ring and enslaved the wills of the 9. Yet despite all that, we know very little about Celebrimbor, and Tolkien also changed his mind about the character several times. So how do you adapt such a character for a series, like I have attempted with my own Second Age series? I've done my best to break down Celebrimbor's backstory, to better understand what kind of elf he might have been, based on what we actually know. In the process, I couldn't help notice some similarities with Gatsby from the Great Gatsby. It may sound like quite a stretch. How can Gatsby, a fictional character set in the 1920s of New York, have any similarities with the grandson of Fëanor himself? Well, hear me out, and you might see it too. And how Gatsby can be a way to better understand the mind of Celebrimbor, or at least the Celebrimbor I'll present in the Second Age series. First, I'll list the 7 similarities I found between the characters, and then break down each point and provide examples that I hope you'll find as fascinating as I did when doing this deep dive into the characters. Number 1. Never accepts his parents as they failed. Gatsby is the son of 2 poor farmers from North Dakota. He changes his name from James Gatz to J. Gatsby to create the persona he wants to be.
His parents were dirt poor farmers from North Dakota, but he never accepted them as his parents at all. In his own imagination, he was a son of God, destined for future glory.
What's interesting to remember here is that Gatsby is ashamed of his parents and their achievements or lack thereof, which also means he is ashamed of himself, who he truly is. This is important to remember as we see how this compares to Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor also distanced himself from his father, Corofin, and his uncles. We know little about his mother from the lore, and that won't really play a huge role in the story either. But it's interesting she remained in Aman, which also creates a distance between her and Celebrimbor. The last thing we know about him from the First Age is this: when Celebrimbor learned the truth of his father and uncle's actions, he was aghast and parted ways with them. He was not subject to their exile and did not voluntarily follow them. His whereabouts for the remainder of the First Age are unknown. This of course creates some wiggle room for the series, though I haven't really used it much. I don't want to add too much that isn't actually hinted to, at least. What's fascinating about Celebrimbor's character, in this case, is how he sees their misdeeds and wants to redeem himself and achieve something glorious, a name for himself that is not shadowed by the action of his father and uncles. Number 2 is ashamed of what he truly comes from and wants to be seen as great. Gatsby is ashamed of coming from nothing and being dirt poor, which is why he surrounds himself with everything expensive and high status. He wants to be seen differently than what he truly is. Celebrimbor wants the same in a way. The other elves still associate him and his name with the horrors committed by his grandfather and uncles. Celebrimbor is ashamed of that and wants to be seen differently by others. This is also why he distanced himself from the elves and valued the friendship with the dwarves. It's very important we distinguish between shame and guilt in this example. Guilt means he would feel responsible, that he did something wrong, whereas he doesn't. He only feels shame and wants to be associated with something different than the crimes of his father and uncles. This is somewhat paradoxical in the case of his grandfather. Fëanor was great in many ways, but his crafts and actions also led to many terrible events. So Celebrimbor is both drawn into the greatness of Fëanor while also being doomed by trying to repeat and outdo his grandfather. In this pursuit for greatness, he dooms himself and all of Middle-earth, which is symbolized by the One Ring and the other rings of power.
My life, old sport, my life. My life has got to be like this. It's got to keep going up.
Number 3. Climbs from nothing into power and wealth. Both Gatsby and Celebrimbor come from rather low status to become high status based on their skills and intelligence.
I always knew that I could climb. But I could only climb if I climbed alone.
To achieve their goals and greatness, they're not too proud to get their hands dirty. The end justifies the means, in a way. This is what Anatar taps into, how he manipulates Celebrimbor and gives in to his desires. He has to choose between Galadriel and his pursuit for glory. He knows he cannot have Galadriel, so he gives in to the temptation of Anatar, a stranger that claims to have been an apprentice of Alla, and based on his skills, he is not lying. Celebrimbor is led to believe that he can only achieve true greatness with Anatar's help, and so Galadriel is banished from Eregion. I know not everyone will like this version from the lore, but I've tried to include as much as possible, even when we have bits that contradict each other. I've done my best to give reason to these different accounts that we can read, and in a way make as many of them true as possible. Number 4. Wants to recreate the past and not let it go.
He talked a lot about the past, as if he wanted to recover something.
If I could just get back to the start. If I could just get back to the start, I could find it again.
Gatsby wants to recreate the past romantic relationship with Daisy, while Celebrimbor wants to recreate the romanticized glory of the Noldor. This is a rather vague image of the past, much like we can have grand visions about the glory of the Roman Empire today, while in reality, the world was not exactly as we think or imagine. The difference here, though, is that Celebrimbor once lived in Valinor. It is not some vague imagination of the past, but rather memories of what once was. He remembers the light of the two trees, he remembers the Silmarils Fëanor created, and how they were stolen, but he also remembers the kinslayings, and all the wrongs done by his close kin, which again ties to his shame. He is in many ways not only at war within himself, but also with time itself. How can you go back in time? Can you even repeat the past, or somehow recreate it?
You can't repeat the past.
Can't repeat the past.
No.
Why, of course you can. Of course you can.
This is also something we see in Gatsby. The first time he meets Daisy again, he destroys the clock on the mantelpiece, the very symbol of him trying to stop time, or go back to a time that is no more. But time can never be stopped. We all fated to follow it, whether we like it or not. At the same time, Celebrimbor also desires Galadriel, and feel Celeborn stole her from him, as we can read in one version found in the Unfinished Tales, but we will get back to that. While both characters seem to focus on the past, they do have very clear images of the future in their heads and their role in that future. They are both ruthless in their pursuits and will go to great lengths, turning dreams into reality. In fact, they lie to themselves about this grand vision. Deep down within them, they have a feeling it can't be done. They know it's a game they can never win, but they keep going because there's nothing else worth doing. They can even become quite serious when someone confronts them about this insecurity within themselves, as we also see with Gatsby when Nick says he can't repeat the past.
You're wrong about the past, old sport. You're wrong.
Notice the two statues of the Ravens of Odin as he is leaving. Hugin, the Raven of Thought, and Munin, the Raven of Memories or the Mind. This is what Gatsby is, constantly thinking and haunted by his memories, constantly trying to recreate what once was. Like Gatsby, Celebrimbor is tormented by his thoughts and his memories, a constant desire to be great, surpass his grandfather, not feel ashamed, and not least, to be loved by Galadriel. Number 5. Has a very grand vision of himself. Both Gatsby and Celebrimbor have very grand visions of themselves, to the extreme, even where they will settle for nothing that is not the best. There's always room for improvement, to reach further, and become greater. This in a way also makes them miserable, as there's always a new goal to achieve, and they never feel fully satisfied with what they got. Number 6. He's in love with a woman he can't have, as she is married to another. Both of the characters are in love with a married woman they can't have. Gatsby is in love with Daisy, that married to Tom while he was away fighting in the First World War, and then studying in Oxford for a short time. Celebrimbor, on the other hand, is in love with Galadriel in one version, as we can read in the Unfinished Tales. I know this might come as a shock to some, so let's look at the actual quote. "I would have trees and grass about me that do not die, here in the land that is mine," she answered. "What has become of the skill of the Eldar?" Celebrimbor said, "Where now is the stone of Earendil, and the Nerthil who made it is gone. They have passed over the sea," said Galadriel. "With almost all fair things else, but must then Middle-earth fade, and perish forever. That is its fate, I deem, said Celebrimbor. But you know that I love you, though you turn to Celebrimbor of the trees, and for that love I will do what I can, if happily by my art your grief can be lessened. There's a major difference between the characters on this specific point though. In Gatsby's story, Daisy and him were actually together for a short time before the war broke out, but Galadriel and Celebrimbor never had a romantic relationship as far as we know. So while Daisy leads on Gatsby, Galadriel doesn't do the same to Celebrimbor. He deeply desires her, but his love is not requited. This is also why he chooses to seek glory instead. In other words, had Galadriel loved Celebrimbor, the fate of many would have been very different, and the Rings of Power might not have been made, at least not in my second Age series. Number 7. Both get killed pursuing their desire to recapture the past. Both Gatsby and Celebrimbor get killed for pursuing their goals. Gatsby gets shot while trying to win back Daisy, while Celebrimbor gets tortured and killed by Sauron. Both tragic deaths, but at least Celebrimbor redeems some of his misdeeds by hiding the 3 rings from Sauron. For both the characters, it's their determination and ambitions that make them blind and in the end kills them. From the lore, I also find it interesting that other elves like Celeborn don't fall in Region. To me this could indicate Celebrimbor stays back to face Sauron, the ultimate way to redeem his character and at least achieve moral victory, which is a very Tolkienian thing. Sort of like we see it with Boromir, defending Merry and Pippin to the very end. I know not everyone interprets it like this, but I think it makes for a great ending for his character, and perhaps the audience can forgive his flaws, now that he has done everything in his power to redeem himself and stop Sauron. If not, you can at least feel empathy for him as he gets tortured, and in the end, when his corpse is used as a banner for Sauron's armies. Now we have walked through the 7 similarities, and we should try to better understand who these characters are. For this, I've used an article I found about Gatsby in relation to the personality test from Myers-Briggs. I guess some of you are familiar with it. I won't go into details about it here, you'll have to do that on your own. I find it more interesting to present what the article tells about Gatsby, and how I've used that for Celebrimbor, with some changes of course. They are not the exact same character, as you might have noticed through these 7 points. Similar in certain ways, but still very different. Turbulent Architect. The Myers-Briggs says name INTJs as architects, and the T at the end means he's a turbulent architect, which will become more clear as we look into how each of the letters fits the character. Introverted. Like most introverted personalities, Celebrimbor often prefers to stay quietly in the background. He also spends a lot of time alone, working in his workshop and pursuing new wonders to create. He is often left unsatisfied with his accomplishments and will at times sit alone, thinking about his deepest desires. Celebrimbor tries to fit in among the wealthy, high-profile elves who visit his workshop, but he is often socially awkward and simply don't have the proper manners. As an outsider and an architect, he doesn't care much about social conventions and would rather avoid them. His friendship with Na'vi is the exception though, but mainly because Na'vi is much like him and is also driven by ambition with no desires for much else. He also prefers to rely on himself as much as possible, only pulling other people, like Na'vi, into his plans when necessary. This tendency is more typical for introverts, especially independent analysts. In fact, turbulent architects are the personality types most likely to say they consciously avoid having to depend on others. This is also why it's so hard for Celebrimbor to admit he needs Anatar's help, and why he doesn't do it right away. It is only when he realizes he needs his help that he gives in to Anatar's schemes. Intuitive. On the surface, Celebrimbor is quite caught up in materialism. He seems to measure his life by his possessions and crafts. This may make him seem like a concrete, observant personality type. On the other hand, he also views his wealth and possessions as a necessary step towards his larger goals, rivaling Fëanor, getting Galadriel, and become known as the greatest smith of all time. All these materials are only tools for his ambitions, and he will craft anything as long as it brings him closer to his end goal. Celebrimbor is a dreamer, constantly envisioning a better future for himself and focusing on what is possible rather than what is practical. Like many intuitive personalities, he often seems somewhat distracted or detached from what's happening around him. Galadriel can see Anatar's flaws, but Celebrimbor can't or won't. This is what leads to the rebellion and why he continues to trust Anatar. He is the key and the only way for Celebrimbor to achieve his goals, so he has to choose between greatness or Galadriel. Knowing that he can never have Galadriel, he sacrifices everything for his other dream. It's only when Anatar's true identity is revealed that he tries to redeem himself, hides the rings of power, and sends the three away. Two for Gil-galad, that will later give one to Elrond, and later the other to Círdan. Here Celebrimbor also tries to earn the forgiveness of Galadriel by giving her Nenya, the ring of water, made with mithril and set with a white stone of adamant. Nenya's power was preservation, protection, and concealment from evil. This is a common challenge found in architects' romantic relationships. They are always creating a world in their heads that is more perfect than reality, and they need their romantic partners to fit their fantasy in some way. His fantasy of being with Galadriel is unrealistic and takes little regard to what Galadriel actually wants. He is blind to the love she has for Celeborn, or simply won't accept it as a fact. Even so, Celebrimbor never gives up on his dream of winning her heart. His intuitive personality trait provides the main source of his idealism. He holds on to the hope that in the end, he will get Galadriel and be greater than his grandfather. It is this dream vision that motivates his every action until his inevitable fall. Thinking. All his dreaming and fantasizing, Celebrimbor is also a thinking personality type, who relies on his head rather than his heart, most of the time. The exception being Galadriel, of course. His own feelings tend to catch him off guard. For Celebrimbor, the experience of falling in love is both shocking and profound, and he loses his objectivity where Galadriel is concerned. He loves her blindly and cannot see her faults, but also believes he needs to prove himself to win her heart. While he does make sacrifices for Galadriel, he is mainly focused on getting what he wants, rather than helping other people or acting for the greater good. He may claim otherwise, but it's all part of a greater plan to achieve his dreams. Judging. He is orderly, cautious, and deliberate. He comes up with a plan for achieving every goal, then he executes it. This decisive, thorough approach is characteristic of judging architects, who along with commanders, ENTJ, are the personality types most likely to say they are dedicated and focused on their goals. Celebrimbor is good at spotting and taking advantage of opportunities when they arise, but on the whole, he is not spontaneous and relaxed like prospecting personalities. This is also something we'll experience in regards to Anatar and how their relation develops. Notably, turbulent architects are the personality types most likely to regard compromise as defeat. This is also what shapes his actions in regards to Anatar. Turbulent.
Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, in one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past.
The author of The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald, surely wasn't thinking about personality theory when he wrote The Great Gatsby, but this famous passage from the book actually captures the outlook of constant improvers quite well. Celebrimbor believes that his success depends on his own performance, and that if he just tries harder, he'll achieve his goals. He has to. He has staked his entire life on his dreams. Turbulent personality types are prone to experiencing a wide range of strong emotions, which can make things especially difficult for a thinking type like Celebrimbor, who prefers to hide his feelings. Celebrimbor's turbulence helps explain why his reaction to falling in love is so extreme. He often seems self-assured, but his increasing worry, doubt, and desperation are also evident throughout the story, especially as Anatar gets introduced and the Rings of Power are made. Celebrimbor also spends a lot of time thinking about the past, which is also a turbulent tendency. We often think of analysts as forward-thinking personalities focused on the future, and they are. But turbulent architects, along with turbulent logicians, are also the most likely of all personality types to wish they could change their past. This is also why we see some of his flashbacks from the First Age. Not only does he want to change the events that has happened, but he also believes if things had been different, he would be closer to his goal, or that Galadriel would have loved him instead of Celeborn. Celebrimbor fails to realize that the past can't be repeated, recaptured, or changed. This is his fate and his ultimate doom. But even in the face of his own doom, he draws his sword one last time and is ready to meet Sauron head on. Anatar, the bringer of gifts and death. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and share it with people that might be interested. I know we are all going through some rough years due to the inflation. If you got anything to spare, I would be extremely grateful if you donate with super thanks or become a member here on YouTube or Patreon. Feel free to check out one of these videos next. As always, thank you all for watching and being part of the Council of the Rings. Farewell till next time.